Hey, healthy readers. This is the wrap up, roundup, catch up, whatever you want to call it, video for 2024's book club selection. And this is all the books that we read. I want to take a quick spin through them and share a little bit about my thoughts as we went through these books and some of the things that we learned. There was one book in here that was actually a disappointment, but that happens. And in general, I really liked them. I thought they were fascinating. The very first book was 10% Happier by Dan Harris. And I try generally to start the year with some kind of a book that has thoughtfulness, mindfulness, something that's going to help us get the year off to a good start. This book did not disappoint. I was astonished to learn his story and how he shifted from being a newscaster who had a full-blown panic attack on camera live to someone who now is known for meditation, mindfulness, an app, a whole group of people coming together for this. And the book had some really great suggestions for things that you could add to increase mindfulness in your day. I really enjoyed it a lot. I learned a few new things, and so it was a great fit. Next was Talks In, Talks Out, and this book is by Bruce Laurie and Rick Smith. This is the follow-up book to Slow Death by Rubber Duck, which we had read before. And I was interested in hearing what they did because these two folks deliberately poisoned themselves with all kinds of things that we are exposed to in our everyday lives, household chemicals, all that kind of stuff. And this was how they got the toxins out. And they looked at a number of different ways to do it, different detox theories, different ways to support the body. I found it really fascinating, very interesting, and I learned a number of things. As a matter of fact, this book is the only book to date that I have ever put an interrobang in. That is a punctuation mark that is question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point, because it was so astonishing that I had to use that one. Normally I use smileys and hearts and sad faces and exclamation points and that sort of thing. But I used an interrobang in this one because that fact really stood out. So this was a really interesting book. I will say, if you're going to read this, I highly recommend that you start with Slow Death by Rubber Duck first. Next was The Mind-Gut Connection by Emmerin Mayer. And this was a really interesting book talking about the connection between our gut, our brain, and how it impacts body health. This is a topic that I thought I knew a fair amount about. I knew some, but I definitely learned some new things, some interesting things from this book. So that was really fascinating. And I wound up with a lot of notes in this book, which was great. And it really helped me sort of dive a little deeper into how much we tend to disregard gut health and how we feel and how we don't always recognize that connection between our feelings, our emotions, our mindset, and how we move forward. We disconnect how that's really associated with our gut. So this, for me, was a really fascinating book. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. For anyone who's watching this video who has not read these books, this is definitely one that I recommend. Lifetime. So this is by Russell Foster. This is a book about your body clock, your circadian rhythm, basically, and how it supports us. It's important for our overall health and well-being, for sleep. This is not really a book about how to sleep or how to do these things differently. It is simply a book about the processes, the mechanisms by which our body works and puts all of this together. I found this book very interesting. Lots of really cool facts in here. I especially found it interesting to talk about people who have different work schedules because of their profession, nurses, people who have to work shifts or that kind of thing. It was also really interesting to see all the different kinds of sleep. I'm just trying to see if I can find it here. He also talked a lot about different medications and how they can impact our body, our circadian rhythm. So this was definitely a very interesting book. I will say it was a little bit dry. Uh, I guess not to be, that's probably not a surprise given the nature of what's in here. It was still very interesting. And I do think for anyone who wants to learn more about their circadian rhythm and the connection between our different pieces and parts, mind, body, brain, gut, all of that, this could be a good book. This book, The Secret History of Home Economics, this wound up being a bit of a disappointment. I was really excited because, as I shared in the video when I posted it, I took home economics when I was in middle school a very long time ago. And so many, many years ago, everybody took home economics and we learned all kinds of things, knife skills, how to read a recipe, cooking, modifications, sewing, all kinds of things. And I was really excited for this book and learning about the history of home economics. It turned into a disappointment for several reasons. There's a lot of wonderful history here about people who truly made a difference. They were pioneers and they were astonishing in stepping outside of societal roles to create something that to this day is actually very important. I feel like the book was too long. And they just kept repeating things. So you'd read it and then you'd read it a little bit later, phrased a little bit differently. So I was a little sad about that. And I felt like there wasn't a good flow to the book. It didn't flow as well as I had hoped. I'm going to say that if you want to learn more about the history of home economics, this is probably the most comprehensive thing you will ever find. But about halfway through the book, I felt like I was wishing that it was over, that I'd had enough, and that I felt like she wasn't moving the story further as well as I might have hoped. So this book was a bit of a disappointment. But I'm still glad we read it, learned a lot of stuff, thought it was interesting, and I also got some, just some ideas for things from reading this book about food and kitchens and how it all came together and how our lives have changed because of the introduction of the science of home economics. So that part was interesting. And the last book that we read for the year, Banana, The Fate of the Fruit That Changed the World. This was fascinating. I really enjoyed this book. I learned so much about bananas, which it turns out are the most popular fruit worldwide, globally. Everybody loves a banana. I also learned that there's way more bananas than we see in the United States. We see just a handful. There are dozens and dozens of varieties. Some varieties of bananas are hyper local because they won't grow outside their tiny little area, their small space. So that was interesting. And just learning about the history of this fruit and how much it changed the world. It really did. Trade and all kinds of things happened because of the banana. I will say I learned so much from this book that I started deliberately seeking out different kinds of bananas. And at my grocery store at one point, they had a different banana that I'd never seen. I bought it simply because I'd read this book and I wanted to try it. It turned out to be sort of plantain-like. It was very thick, so it wasn't a sweet banana. It was better for cooking. I went to the ethnic grocery stores and found other bananas and tried those. And so that was kind of an adventure. And it was all inspired by this book, Banana, The Fate of the Fruit That Changed the World, because it really did. So this was a great book. I would say out of all of these books that we read this year, my two favorite were The Banana, the Potato, the Fruit That Changed the World. That was my number one, and a very close second. So number one, and a very close second for 2024's Healthy Readers Book Club was 10% Happier by Dan Harris. So if out of this group of 6, you had to pick just 2, these would be the ones that I would recommend. I will put the links to everything down below. And I hope if you are a Healthy Readers Book Club member that you enjoyed these books and got a lot out of them, just like I did. And if you are not a member, I encourage you to join us. I will put the link below. And I can't wait to see you on the other side of this guided book tour that we call the Healthy Readers Book Club. Thanks so much. Bye, folks.